Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar today, the last minute year-end fundraising survival guide. We're going to give everyone a minute or two to get set up, so thank you for all who are joining. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to chat in your questions or submit them in the Q&A pane, and we would love to get to any questions that we can. Before diving too deep, just a reminder that today's webinar is going to be recorded. So we're going to be covering a lot, and I mean a lot of details. Don't worry if you miss something. I'm going to send out the recording tomorrow. So you can always replay it, share it with your team, share it with your friends, and yeah, rewatch later. Before I dive too deep into what today's webinar is going to be all about and introduce Kelly, I also want to just launch a poll quick, just so that we can get a sense of who's in our audience and tailor our content. So our poll today is, have you run a year-end fundraising campaign before? So I'm going to launch that now and give everyone a minute or two, or 30 to 60 seconds to respond. Everyone's pretty quick on the uptake on this one, which is
We're getting very accustomed to Zoom, are we not?
yeah. Everyone's a Zoom pro by now. Oh, okay. So I'll give everyone just another 5-10 seconds. We're getting a lot of responses. And close it out. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like 44% of you have run a year-end fundraising campaign before. So it sounds like you're here to learn a little bit more about the best practices to help improve your year-end fundraising, while 56% of you have not run a year-end fundraising campaign before. So during today's webinar, you're going to get a lot of those practical tips to help you run a really fantastic year-end fundraising campaign, even though it's kind of last minute. So yeah, so this webinar is presented by CauseVox. CauseVox is a digital fundraising platform that helps nonprofits raise more with less effort, so you can run your year-end fundraising campaign with our fundraising platform using crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, or our embeddable donation forms. Something that's been really popular at the moment is virtual fundraising. So if you are planning on integrating a virtual fundraising event into your year-end plan, we can help with that as well. Okay, so I am not going to take too much longer, but I wanted to turn it over to Kelly, who really is a gift. She has 10 years of experience working with nonprofits and is now a consultant. She's your nonprofit coach, and she has taken a wealth of experience from working at small organizations and help them build up individual giving over the past 10 years. And so she's bringing you all of her insights of working in the trenches at a nonprofit and helping organizations like yours translate that into their year-end fundraising success. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Kelly to lead our webinar today.
Awesome. Thanks, Candace. Well, I'll just say a few words about me and then we'll hit the ground running. As Candace said, I have over a decade of experience in the nonprofit industry. I started at much bigger nonprofits, and then I kind of followed my heart into smaller organizations, and then I started my consulting practice with small nonprofits in mind. So everything I do is with a goal of taking best practice and advanced fundraising techniques and making it manageable and digestible for small nonprofits that maybe have small staff, lack resources, and all of that kind of stuff, but to make sure that we're also taking advantage of all the best practice in the industry. So that is what I am all about. So what's included in this? We've got the webinar. As Candace said, she'll be sending it out so you can watch later. And then you can get in on free digital fundraising consultations from CauseVox and from me for participating. So we'll have information later on how you can take us up on that offer. So just diving right in, I see some of you have done fundraising campaigns before at year end, some of you have not. But the main thing I always hear from nonprofits for starting out is, how do you set goals and targets? This target workbook is available on my website with much more context and explanation, but just to blitz through it right now, you do want to do a little bit of math to see what is reasonable to aim for. So this worksheet helps you work through that. In general, I think you want to take kind of your growth rate over the past 3 years. If you've done year-end campaigns in the past, just look at that growth rate. And so I want you to calculate your average growth rate. That's what this worksheet helps you do. And then you average them together. So you can kind of come up with, looking at your average growth rate over 2 or 3 years, you can come up with a general idea of what you can raise if you do nothing different from prior years. But then if you're going to put a lot more effort into this year's campaign, you can maybe project a little up, a little down, but you have kind of your baseline. But then I always encourage folks to ground truth those numbers, because otherwise we're just kind of doing a thought exercise. So one thing I talk people through, and again, this will go into much more detail if you download it from my website. You take giving levels that are kind of standard, 25, 50, 100, whatever makes sense for your nonprofit. So you're going to take those giving levels and you're going to assess how many donors do you have at each of those levels. And then I like to encourage folks to think through, are there donors who you've engaged with a lot this year? Are there people who you think you can upgrade? I encourage you to write down the names of those people, or at least the numbers, and then kind of add that to what you think you can bring in from any given level. And that will help you total that up and see what you actually can bring in. But without names, you're just, again, it's just kind of a random thought experiment. If you've never run a campaign before, then this page of the workbook that I have available is really, really helpful, because you might not have current donors at that level, but it will help you think through the prospects and who are you going to reach out to with this campaign and what do you think they can give, to help you kind of figure out what the target should be for your year-end campaign. And then once I have an overall target for the campaign, I like to create weekly targets. So if you're just coming to this now, you're probably going to want to spend the next couple of weeks getting ready and then launch it in December. So we're looking at a 4-week campaign for you. You want to stay on track with those weekly targets. So I take the full campaign and I divide it by the number of weeks I'm running that campaign. And then, because sometimes campaigns start a little slow, I like to divide that by 50% so that the first week is only 50% of each weekly goal. And then I tack that 50% onto the last week. We all know December 31st is such a huge day for donations. So calculating that in, a lot of your gifts are going to come in that last week. So let's say I have a goal of 20,000 over 4 weeks. The momentum is going to come in at the end. So I would stack my goals as 2,500 the first week. I would want to make an additional 5,000 the next week to get to 7,500 and so forth to reach my $20,000 goal. Now, I don't necessarily need to hit those targets every single week, but I try to make those cumulative. So if in the first week I raised 2,000 instead of 2,500, okay, that's fine. Maybe I'll make it up the next week. But if you're consistently below, then it might be time to reassess or think about adding things to your campaign to make sure you make that target. So this is just more of a rule of thumb and a way to gauge your success throughout the campaign. So then how do you build a plan? CauseVox has this great, and Candace, I assume you can share how people can get a hold of this, but a great fundraising calendar planning template that lets you plan every single day of your campaign. It's very, very helpful to start your campaign with this in mind, and that you've got the whole thing mapped out so you know exactly what you're doing. So this is what we're aiming for by the end of this webinar, is to know what our plan's going to look like. In general, if you're just getting started right now, I would say November is when you do some pre-launch cultivation. You need to do your planning, but also think about what are we going to do right now to get our donors ready for the campaign. I always recommend starting out with some sort of thank you, a thank you call campaign that you bring your board in on, a thank you email, doing lots of social that's talking about what your supporters have helped you accomplish that year. If the first thing your people hear from you is a solicitation, it's going to catch them off guard. It's also going to what I consider kind of our worst fault in the nonprofit world is treating our donors kind of like ATMs. It's like, I'm here for money now because it's that time of year. No donor wants to be treated that way. So think about, in the next couple of weeks, what can you do to say thank you, or to educate your supporters on what you've accomplished over the past year with their help. Then in December is the meat of the campaign. So how are you going to communicate throughout the campaign? What's the timing? Who's responsible for that? That's what you want to think about with the plan. And then finally, I always say January is still a part of your campaign. Year end doesn't end December 31st. It ends at the end of January. You want to plan in cultivation after your campaign to make sure your donors give again. Again, trying to avoid that feeling of, I'm just an ATM, you come to me for money once a year and then you leave. So plan thank yous right after they make the gift. If that's an automated email, great. But then in January, follow up, do something additional. Can you do printed thank yous, handwritten thank yous for your top donors? Could, again, bring the board in to do thank you calls. Another thing to note is, once a donor has given to you, try to make sure you've set up some way to pull them out of the ask pool, because it can, best case, it confuses your donor. They say, I thought I already gave, why am I still getting asks? But worst case, it can kind of tick them off. So we want to avoid that. So make sure, however you set up your campaign, there are ways to pull the people out that have already given. I like to always do a thank you call campaign with board members in January. I think it's really, really helpful in a way small nonprofits can really shine with their donors. But then I always send a second thank you email with some sort of tax receipt for 2019, 2020. I'm in denial that we're in 2020. You want to send a summary of their giving in 2020 for tax purposes. It's not required of you necessarily that you send a tax summary, but it is greatly appreciated. I've always had donors really appreciate the organizations that send those tax summaries out in January. So just incorporate January into your planning. So a multi-channel campaign, what does that look like? I like to plan my multi-channel campaigns around an online fundraising hub or a main donation page. It's a homepage for the campaign that centralizes all the information about your campaign, about your organization, some great graphics, that kind of thing, that just the final step that's going to convert a donor and make them want to give. You're here on a CauseVox webinar, so you have a awesome tool at your fingertips. A CauseVox campaign page is a great way to create an online fundraising hub. But then I want you to think about what channels build on which. So this is a specific campaign that I visualized for another nonprofit, a specific nonprofit. Yours does not have to look this way. But this is one way to think about it. You want to think about all the channels that you have and which ones fuel which other ones, which ones are directly directing to your fundraising hub and asking for donations, and which ones are calling attention to other things. So for this campaign, for example, I had social media in a supportive role, driving people to the email list for the nonprofit so that we could ask via email. that was a very specific choice that we made for this organization. So, so think about how you want everything to fuel each other. It's not hit donors everywhere. Don't ask randomly. You need to think about a flow and how people are going to interact with your organization. So as far as your online fundraising hub, this is a great example of a page that was built on CauseVox. I love this example because it's very clean, very beautiful graphics, but it doesn't overcrowd you. You don't feel like you're getting bombarded with information. You can clearly see their fundraising goal, how far they are on their fundraising goal, and you see also exactly where you need to take action. So if you build your page on CauseVox, it's going to look like this no matter what. So you're going to follow all that best practice. But then if you scroll down, what I love about this page is they round out that top with a really great case for support. They have testimonials from their clients. There are faces, there are quotes. They're making their clients real people to their donors. The donate button continues to float at the top and it's bright yellow, so it's easy to see, so that at any point somebody can click that donate button. So this is a great example. CauseVox, of course, can help you get yours set up, but I love a lot of the pages that people are able to create with CauseVox's tools. So that's a great option for your online fundraising hub. So just to blitz through the different channels and some pros and cons. So I think mailed appeals are what a lot of people think of or imagine when they hear the word appeal, right? We've been getting them for years in our mailbox. If you're starting this late, a mailed appeal might be a little hard to pull off, but it is not impossible. If you've never done it before, if you've never done a mailed appeal, I do not recommend starting with mailing everyone in your database. I recommend starting really small. One place I like to start with a lot of nonprofits just to see if mailed appeals are going to be something that's going to work for the organization. I like to start with donors who have only ever given by check. It's normally a small number of people, and you're probably going to have their mailing address because they've mailed you things before. And so it's a great opportunity to kind of test if a mailed appeal would work for you. Some pros to mailed appeals are they are helpful for reactivating donors because it physically arrives in their house. They're going to have to deal with it one way or another. You do get a better response rate from older donors, and I'm talking like 75 plus. From mailed appeals. For smaller nonprofits, you can stand out by personalizing them. In this example, you can see there's some handwriting on it that helps it stand out. And then you can tell longer stories because you generally are going to do at least 2 pages for a mailed appeal. That's what tests best with donors when different people have tested that. So if you have kind of a complicated mission, it's a great opportunity to be able to kind of dive into that. The cons, of course, is pretty costly because you have to design it, you have to print it, you normally have to include a remittance envelope so they can send a check back, you have postage, and if you're using a mail house, that's an additional expense. So it can be pretty costly. You do need to have good, clean data. So I recommend running a national change of address search on your database before you do this, unless you're really, really sure that you've kept up with your donors' addresses. And then it requires a little more effort to determine how effective it was, because you don't actually know how many people opened it or read it or anything like that, because it's a physical item that you're sending out. So then email appeals. This is really where fundraising is at right now. Most donors are pretty savvy in online giving. It's easy, it's efficient, they feel like it's secure. So a lot of donors are comfortable giving online, and that works to our advantage. And like I said, mailed appeals work for much, much older donors, but boomers, Gen X, millennials, all the way down are pretty comfortable with online giving at this point. So the upsides to email appeals, it's inexpensive. It's pretty simple to carry out technically. MailChimp has a free level of their services that you can invest in. So it really is, there's not a lot of heavy investment. It also is helpful because you can really personalize things with mail merge and that kind of thing. And it's very easy to track your results. You can see how many people opened it, how many people clicked, and then you can see based on the number of donations, then how many people followed through on that click. So you can really see the impact of your work. So you can do a lot of testing that way. The cons, I think I don't really need to dive into. Look at your own inbox. That's the con. People are inundated with emails, so you don't know how much people are going to read. So it requires a certain amount of skill and finesse to make sure people open it and click it and really read it. So that's part of what we're going to get into a little bit later. But really, 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 if you do nothing else, email is where it's at for me. That's how I plan my campaigns, is email, and then we tack on other things. Social media. If you're doing multi-channel, social media is kind of a given. I think everybody's living on social media at this point. I really strongly advise that this not be your only channel. And I also like to caution people in using the Facebook donate feature. It gets you a quick donation, yes, but you lose a lot of data. Most of the time you only get your donors' names, and so it makes your cultivation of them for a second gift much, much harder. So doing something like asking on Facebook, but then sharing your CauseVox page on social media, you get so much more data, because when you use CauseVox, you own that data, not Facebook. So just something to think about as you're doing social media. Most data I'm seeing indicate that social can support other fundraising channels, but it tends to not be a great channel unto itself. My feeling on that is the algorithms mean a lot of folks aren't necessarily seeing all of your posts, so they're not getting the whole story. They're not seeing everything. They're not seeing a well-developed campaign. They're just seeing a post or two floating out in space. So I like to say this is not your primary channel, but absolutely, absolutely use social media to reinforce what you're sending via email. Phone calls. Unpopular opinion, phone calls are awesome. I really, really love incorporating phone calls into year-end campaigns. This is the single most effective method I have ever used at any nonprofit to reactivate lapsed and LIBUNT donors. Just to give you an example, I worked with one nonprofit that had 300 donors. We took donor retention from about 60% to 80% in a single campaign, and doubled revenue from the year-end campaign from $15,000 to $30,000 by calling our lapsed donors. So it's a really, really powerful tool. Also, not a lot of nonprofits take the time to call and talk to their donors to say thank you, or ask them, hey, do you want to give? No? Okay, why not? Tell us, what can we do better? People really, really appreciate that. And phone calls are actually not as time consuming as I think a lot of people think. You can call 40 donors in about 2 hours. You're going to leave a lot of voicemails, and that's fine. You've tried to contact them. It has a similar impact to even talking to them. But what I'm also seeing in the wake of COVID is people are way more interested in answering their phones and talking to people. And so that's, I think this year presents a really unique opportunity, and I really, really encourage you to get on the phone with your donors. And then peer-to-peer. This is something that I really love. I love peer-to-peer fundraising. The pros are, it's a great donor acquisition tool. It's very cost effective, especially if you're going to use CauseVox. People trust their friends. So peer-to-peer does a lot of heavy lifting on cultivation for you. So it ends up being a pretty quick converter from people who have just heard of your organization to willing to donate, because they're trusting their friends' good opinion of you. The only downsides are it requires some planning. You can't just create a peer-to-peer page and expect to, this is not one of those if you build it, they will come kind of things. You do need to have a good plan set up. So success is dependent on the people you can recruit to fundraise for you and how fired up they are. You can do that with a well-planned campaign. And I did a webinar with CauseVox on peer-to-peer fundraising. I'm sure Candace can share the link to that course if that's something that you're interested in incorporating into your campaign. So choosing your story, I really, really advocate that your year-end fundraising tells some kind of story about your organization. Otherwise, you're just firing off random emails. So stories can create emotion, they can create a relationship with your organizations, and donors give because of emotion. One adage, I can't even remember who said this, this is not my original quote, people give to people, they don't give to organizations. So you can tout how well managed you are or your finances, but people give to people. They give because they want to help people. It's not really about logic or how well you're financed. It helps that you have lots of transparency. It helps, but those are things that I say, save that for your updates, save that for newsletters. It's not really something that you need in your fundraising appeals. So saying all that, what makes a good story? It shows the impact of your work. So client stories told by them or your caseworkers are excellent things to use. Validation from external experts, so community leaders, volunteers that work with your organizations who can speak to what they've seen at your organization. Board members talking about how your organization has impacted them or what they've seen your organization do. You can also really think outside the box. In the examples that I showed you earlier of the mailed appeal, that was from OG Theater, which is a building. And Art House Cinema that I have worked with, we built a campaign around the building because people just loved this building. It's a historic building. It's recently been saved from becoming a dollar store. And so the appeal was about how grateful the theater was to still exist. And so think outside the box. There's also a great, if you Google food bank and fill the bag, there's a great food bank that has you sent annual appeals from Fill the Bag, and it's a great kind of mascot they've played a lot with in the past few years. So I like to think about too, how can you tell different stories throughout your campaign from different voices? Whether that's, the first thing comes out by your executive director, and then the next thing is a program director, and the next story is from a volunteer. That's actually really great because then you can send it from people with real names and they're telling their stories. So think about who can tell your organization's story of success this year. Just to give you a couple examples, this is a fundraising appeal from Raíces, where they tell the story of one of their clients. So a client story is a great opportunity. A founder's story. This is something that for newer nonprofits, why you founded this organization, or for older nonprofits around special anniversary years, harken back to your founding. What was the problem that gave rise to your organization's existence? And how does that play into what you're trying to accomplish now? One of my personal favorite appeals is this puppy story. My friend Harrison adopted this dog, and he works for a climate change organization, and he turned his adoption of his dog into a Giving Tuesday campaign. And he used the story of his dog being abandoned because of a hurricane in Florida to tell the story of the impact of climate change on people and animals. And I just thought this was a brilliant way to help people think about current issues differently. And then of course you have these adorable puppy photos that you can send out. So you can really, really think outside the box on how to tell your story. So then how do you manage your campaign? Just a few tools that you want to make sure you have. A donor CRM really helps. A planning spreadsheet, like the one that I showed you that Candace can share. A project management software like Asana or Trello, pick your favorite, but very, very helpful to map out all of your tasks once you've created your planning spreadsheet. A social media management tool like Hootsuite or Buffer, where you can program in your social media so that you're not having to remember to get on all the time. And then an email marketing tool like MailChimp or Constant Contact. Those are really some key tools you're going to need. And then, of course, CosVox for your fundraising hub or otherwise. So those are some main tools that you're going to need to run a great campaign. So then how do you write the materials? That's what I get asked the most is, how do I write a year-end campaign? So how do you draft? I'm a big fan of listening to your colleagues or your clients or board members and recording the stories that they tell. Not that you're necessarily going to transcribe it and tell it literally how they told you the story, but I like to have that. I like to have it recorded so I can listen to it and I can hear their voice while I'm writing the appeal. You can really capture their speech mannerisms or get the nuances in their voice so it really sounds like different people that you're writing from during your campaign, even if you're ghostwriting for all of them. I've also seen some folks recently, because of the situation we're in, using Zoom to record those conversations to make videos for campaigns. And so that's a really clever use as well, just making sure you're above board and that they know they're being recorded, that they're going to be recorded and that kind of thing, making sure you have permission from those folks. But I really, really like doing that as a way to draft appeals. Especially when I'm going to write an appeal that's not from my executive director, who I'm super used to ghostwriting for, or writing for myself. I like telling those stories from different perspectives. And then how long does it need to be is something I hear all the time. It needs to be as long as it needs to be persuasive, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be long. So many nonprofits I've worked with think that their year-end appeal has to tell the donor the ins and outs of their organization, how they work, their theory of change, on and on and on. We think donors need that level of convincing to give, but they really don't. People give because of emotion. People give to other people. So talk about impact, but talk about one person. Tell stories. We are a storytelling culture. We love hearing stories. So one example I love to use is from Casey Cares Foundation. They're an awesome organization working with sick children in Maryland. This was their year-end appeal. They had different emails with a different client of theirs, with really 3-4 paragraphs. That was it. And it was so hard hitting and it was so beautiful. So short and sweet can do a lot. The main thing is you've got to, I love this phrase, you got to hit your donor in the feels, and make them feel some strong, intense emotion. I literally say the only thing I would change about this email appeal is, instead of please give today, I would have it ask, can you make a donation today, instead of just a statement, and we'll go into why a little bit later. But this is a great example of how you can achieve a lot in a very short email. So then, goals and giving levels. If you can tie your organization's goals and the story you are telling to giving levels, all the better. This is something we call a donation impact metric. So that's something like $100 feeds a family for a week. And I know people think this is a little hard, but it really doesn't have to be. It's hard because we're getting pedantic about it. What if I tell a donor $100 is feeding a family, but I pay somebody's salary with it? It's not that complicated. Donors just want to know, what is the cost of providing your services? That's what donation metrics are all about. I know direct service organizations have an easier time of this because it takes this much to support a client in this way. It's a little bit easier. But for advocacy organizations or change organizations, think about things that are critical for your campaign. One example of a client of mine is $100 buys the yard signs for one of our campaigns. $250 pays for volunteer training. $500 pays for a grassroots organizer's travel for the month. I've also worked with performing arts organizations that struggle with this a little bit more. But one example from an art house cinema that I work with, they did a campaign last year that was about how we're more than the multiplex. And so we tied things to things that are probably more expensive for them than at a multiplex. So for example, one of the giving levels was $15 pays an hour wage because we believe in paying our staff a living wage. And so weaving that into your story and using those impact metrics to further tell the story of your organization, your impact is something I think is really key. So awesome copywriting. How do you convince somebody to give? I'm going to hit some really top tips, but if you are interested in diving deeper in this, Tom Ahern has a book called How to Write Fundraising Materials That Raise More Money. It's an awesome book. It took me 2 hours to read, and then it's given me gifts of knowing how to copyright well the rest of my 10-year career. So I really, really love his book. He's done a lot of research on what motivates people to give. The main thing is it's not so much about logic. I've said this before in this presentation. We want to throw lots of stats at our donors, but that's not often what's the most impressive things. We love hearing stories, so a story to create an emotion. People give out of fear. They also give out of hope. So different emotional triggers, and Tom Ahern goes into that in depth in his book. But all of these tips I'm going to give you are true for direct mail, email, social. It really, it'll translate with anything. Copywriting. This example is, again, a mailed appeal. It's a little easier to see them in a mailed appeal. But I love using special graphics or as ways to call things out in text. This is obviously something we did with a mailed appeal for this organization, but we put those same handwriting graphics into an email to make it fun and interesting to read. I got a great response from that. There are 3 ways that they've done eye studies. People have done eye studies on where donors look when they open an email or when they open, a mailed appeal. And there are 3 ways donors read. And so I like to make sure that my appeals, whether they're mailed or email, read this way. Some people read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. So knowing that, what do you say in that first paragraph and last paragraph, that if that's all the person reads, they still get the impact. They still get a little bit of the story. They still get the ask. Some people read the first sentence of every paragraph. So I always tell clients, when you're reading something you've written, especially fundraising materials, read the first sentence of every paragraph. Does that still tell the story? Does somebody still get the information you're trying to communicate through that? And then the last way people read is they only read bolded text or italicized or any specialty text. So again, go back, read it. Does your material, does your copy read in a way that if I only read the bolded materials, I would still get the full story? So those are 3 ways that donors read that I really encourage you to take a look at your materials and see if they still read the way you want them to read if people read them in that way. So the main thing I tell nonprofits is, yes, you're telling your story, but at some point the donor has to become the protagonist. And I want to give you an example of why. So which of these 2 phrases feels more inspiring to you? Your gift today will help us feed 10 children, or you could feed 10 children with your gift today. Which puts your donor in the driver's seat? It's the second one, right? Let's do another one. You helped us end fracking in Maryland. You ended fracking in Maryland. Which one puts your donor in the role of protagonist? And the reason I always have to talk about this is, like with giving levels, we get a little pedantic. My donor didn't do the work, I did the work. They gave me the money to do the work, so they helped. And we use that word help a lot. But I challenge that thinking and say, could you have done that work with no money? No, probably not. So donors don't help you. They don't support you. They make your mission possible, and you need to talk to them in those terms. One further thing that I'm seeing a lot in the wake of the pandemic, how fundraising works in the middle of this pandemic is still a mystery, I think, to a lot of us. But one thing I'm seeing is people feel very powerless right now. That's what I hear from clients. That's what I hear from their donors. People feel powerless. And here is where you hold a key right now. Donating is power. For donors, giving is a way that they can change the world. It's how they can affect change in some small way. So you need to not rob your donors of that power. You need to give them that power. You need to make them feel that power. So when the donor is the protagonist, you're giving them the power to change the world, even if it's in a teeny tiny way by providing one meal to one family. You're giving them some power. That's always been why people give, but I think today I'm seeing it as just that much more critically important to people, is that giving is a way to do something in a world that feels very chaotic right now. So more about copywriting. People like seeing their name. So use a donor's name, or at the very least the word "you," to guide where people look in your text. So if they read nothing else, they will read content paired with their name. So using mail merge features for email, you can write me an email that says, "Dear Kelly, blah, 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 here's our story. Kelly, could you make a gift of $10 today?" I'm going to look at that because my name is there. Adrian Sargent is somebody who has studied effective fundraising copy, and he always says there should be twice as many yous in your fundraising copy as there are we's, or the name of your organization, or any stand-in for your organization. So check that out when you finished copywriting and see how you did on that score. It's a very easy score. And then finally, your PS is critical. I find a lot of organizations use a PS as a throwaway, but sometimes the PS is the only thing somebody reads. So finding a way to make that an ask, or make your appeal sound time sensitive. I love PSs that are something like, "We're running out of time to qualify for a matching gift. Can you send a gift in by December 24th? That's a great way to activate action using your PS. For social, you can't put people's names in it, but you can use the word "you," and you can make your donor your protagonist. So think about that as you're drafting social content. Then personalize. I like to say there's no excuses for not having people's names in your emails when you send them. So at the very least, dear that person's name, not dear friend. But there are other additional ways you can personalize it. Reminding them the amount of their last gift, or when they gave it if they're a lapsed donor. I love to call donors' attentions to that, to say something around the ask that is, "Kelly, your last gift was $25 in 2018. Can you please renew your support for us today?" That's a great way that I can say, "Oh gosh, I feel like I just made that gift, but it was 2 years ago. Oh my goodness." And I've really seen donors respond to that. And then a gift level impact metric, something that takes a little more work, but I've seen pay off, is something that is, if I've given you $25 and you ask me for $100, you're probably not going to get it, because that doesn't fit with my history of giving. But if you ask me for $50, it's just a little bit bigger. And if you compare that with the impact metric, that goes well. So that's something that you can put into a spreadsheet for your donors. Anybody who's given $25 or in this range, you put in that chart the $50, and here's the impact metric, and you use that to mail merge. So personalize as much as you can. The more specific you can make it to your donor, the more likely they are to give. And then here's my current hobby horse. You need to actually ask in your fundraising copy. I see so many things like this. It's a suggestion. "Your gift feeds families in our community." That's very nice. But I am not prompted to answer a question. You're just telling me information. So make sure it's a question, that it ends in a question mark, and it's something that makes me have to pause and answer you in my head when I read it. So something like, "Will you make a gift to support our families?" That is a question I have to answer. But also, will I make a gift? How much? I don't know. When do you need it? So I know so many people in the nonprofit world have have heard of SMART goals. That's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time limited. I want to challenge nonprofits to start making SMART asks. So that means it's specific. Can you make a gift of $50? That's a specific ask. It's measurable. I'm asking for $50 and I'm telling you the measurable impact of what that will have. Attainable. Are you asking for something reasonable? If you're generally mailing that $50 ask, is that reasonable for your lists? Does that jive? Is that your average gift amount? Or maybe slightly more than your average gift amount? Is it relevant? Are you asking to something relevant to your mission? Are you asking for something that's relevant to what you have presented in the fundraising copy that you sent them? And then time limited, a deadline, put a deadline in there. Can you give $50 today? Not at some point, generally in the future. So the more specific you can make on the asks, that you want to take all the thought work out of it. Can you make a gift of $50 today? I can say yes, or I can say no. And I can, if my answer is yes, I can click a link and I can make that donation right away. And I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about how much can I afford, because I've already answered that by answering the can you make a gift of $50 today? So I would challenge you to think about, what does a SMART ask look like for your organization? And then how to stand out in the crowd, making sure you don't land in the trash can. For mailbox inbox, photos, full color, faces, looking into people's eyes. That is something that will help capture your donors' attention. If you're sending a mailed appeal, I like to write on the appeals, even if it's just something that's like, thanks for your support, that I scribble on the top of every single one of them. It's something that's going to stop that donor from throwing it away before they read it. I also sometimes, especially if you're working with a small segment, writing thank you on the back of the envelope, like where you seal it, is a great way to make sure people don't chuck it in the trash, because there's something calling their attention to, like, this is personalized, this is for me. For mailed appeals, 2 pages, front and back, is what tests best. For emails, I like to say try and keep it to 1 page when you're writing it in Google Docs. And then for the mailbox, make sure you have an ask on the first page before they turn it over. They might not make it to the second page. And for emails, make sure there is an ask, what we call above the fold. So if it lands in my mailbox, am I going to see an ask without having to scroll down? So those are ways you can make sure you're standing out and getting people activated. For email, your subject line is so important. So things I tell people to avoid: do not use help, support, give, or donate. They will not open it. They will throw it in the trash because they know what you want if that's in your subject line. I like to try things that are more creative. One, again, this art house cinema that I work with, we sent one that was, go ahead, make my day. We send a lot of emails that are famous movie lines, and they always get open, really, really good open rates. The one thing you can do today to stop climate change, that's very empowering. That's taking that donor as the protagonist narrative and putting it in the subject line. I love that. I love those types of subject lines. Also, urgent, we're running out of time. I like those. Those get good open rates. Also, don't abuse that. If everything's urgent, people will, it's the boy who cried wolf. You're going to get your donors, they're going to stop opening things up. The other thing about email, the things that test best are not sending it from your organization name. Send it from a person. If the fundraising appeal is from your executive director, the executive director's name should be the from in your email. If it's from your board chair, their name should be in the from. So really try to avoid using your organization's name in that from. Social media. How do you stand out there? Making sure your graphics are branded, that they're a visual match for your organization's brand in general and to the campaign, if the campaign has a visual brand, is a really important way to stand out. So often what I will tell people is, like, maybe you're sharing photos, but make sure your logo's on there somewhere, or you frame it in a brand color or something like that, so that when people see it, they don't just keep scrolling, they notice that it's yours. Canva is a great tool to be able to do that kind of work with. It's very quick, it's very easy. It's also free for nonprofits. I love Canva personally. One thing I like to do to make people hearken to the emails I've sent is use sections of emails with quote graphics. So an image with a quote from the mailed appeal, so that somebody who has read the email appeal maybe didn't read it or maybe didn't respond to it, but saw it, read part of it, will see it and go, ooh, that sounds familiar. Why do I know that? And stick with it and read the rest of it. I like to pair email sends outs with related social media posts. Client, volunteer, donor pictures with testimonials are great social media content that you can use to tell your story more. And then I like to vary asks for fundraising with requests to sign up for emails. I really, really like using social media to drive to email. When you're posting to social media, people can see it or not based on the algorithms and how much they check your page and all of those things. But if you can get them to give you your email address, now they're a captured audience. Now they're somebody you can market to specifically in your specific way. So take it out of Facebook's hands. And then I like to tag donors in thank you posts. I normally will okay that with the donor before I do that, but especially donors who are maybe influencers in the community that I'm working with, tagging those donors can be a really great way to engage more people in social media. So I'm going to try and wrap this up and leave a little time for questions, but what to do if things go wrong? Course correcting. Once you've made a plan, I like to say don't make massive changes. You need to write out the campaign to see if the campaign overall works, because you cannot know from one email that your entire plan is going to fail. So look at the analytics, tweak, see what you can change, but don't make massive changes in the middle of a campaign. Reflect after the campaign and make changes for your next campaign. Other things you can do to give it a little lift: add a few emails, call your donors, call your donors, bring in the board to call your donors. That's something I really like to do, or to email your donors personally. The thermometer, I like, if you use CauseVox, you're going to have a thermometer, but having a thermometer on your page to show people how close you are to your goal is really motivating, especially the closer you are to your goal. Being upfront about your need. If we don't make this goal, what won't happen? And another thing I like to use in course correcting is to add a peer-to-peer element, not a whole separate campaign, but reaching out to my donors and say, my best donors, my most committed donors, and saying, hey, I'm worried about reaching our goal. Can you reach out to some of your friends and help us out? Is something that I have done before. So not a peer-to-peer whole campaign, but incorporating a way for your best, most committed folks to help advocate for you, being brand ambassadors and that kind of thing. Okay, key dates to keep in mind. I'm just gonna blitz through this. Thanksgiving, it's next week. It's a day about gratitude. I like to say, make sure you send something saying thank you to your donors next week or the week after before you kick off your campaign. Thanksgiving is just a great way to remember to do it because it's in the name. But make sure you thank your donors sometime this month before you kick off your campaign. There are DEI implications that I think a lot of us are thinking about right now with Thanksgiving. So make sure it's authentic, but a land acknowledgement or something like that that's authentic to your organization, that acknowledges Thanksgiving, if you're speaking directly about Thanksgiving, or send it on Thanksgiving, but also sending it out the week after that's just a, hey, thanks for being a donor, we appreciate you, is something that that I really, really encourage people to do. So it doesn't have to be on Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving is a good marker. Giving Tuesday, I think we all know about Giving Tuesday at this point and know that it's important to incorporate. My biggest note on Giving Tuesday is make sure it's an element of your larger campaign. It does not need to be a campaign in and of itself. Incorporate it into your year-end campaign. There's a lot of noise. So stick with your message, stick with what you've been sending out so that donors know it's you, and just not more Giving Tuesday noise. Also, graphics that mesh with your branding, but use the Giving Tuesday logo or something like that. That's another great way to leverage Giving Tuesday. Christmas, Hanukkah, other religious holidays around this time. I like to leverage these as opportunities to say thank you if, and really only if, the holiday is relevant to your organization, if you're a faith-based organization. Um, Usually I like to, if it is relevant to the organization, some sort of story that would be fun for people to read or share during downtime and celebrations. Um, but I am very cognizant that this year those celebrations are going to look really different to people. And so make sure you're also aware that the holidays might not be the happy, fun times for everybody that that they usually are. Can be really depressing, and I think right now that's just the situation we're in. So I think using it as an opportunity, again, if it's relevant to your organization, doing something uplifting to give your donors a little bit of a boost is a helpful way to acknowledge those holidays this year. December 27th, it's this magical random day that is the number 2 giving day of the year. I think it's just because it's getting close to the end. So I always encourage people to do email and social media on December 27th. My particular favorite thing to do on December 27th is to use an external validator, somebody who is outside of our organization but passionate about our organization, like a volunteer, like a board member, to kind of be a validator to help push people who are hesitating over that line to give. And then, of course, December 31st, it's the end of the tax year. I treat this day as more of a pro forma reminder that people can give to your organization rather than a chance to really make my case to my donors. So, so I like to say this is a chance to practice your 2-paragraph case for support. Not a lot of people are going to read much longer than that. So something image heavy with a clear ask with very little content can be a really nice way to just nudge people that you're still there. But I don't think you're going to get the bandwidth that day to really make your case that day. Hopefully you've made your case and this is just a final reminder. So we blasted through it. If you need some help with this, I am offering a 30-minute coaching session to anybody who attends this. You can go to fitnonprofit.com/causevox to request a 30-minute coaching session. I also, if you go to fitnonprofit.com/year-end, then I have a or actually, I don't think the dash is in there. I'm so sorry. /year end. I have some really affordable packages. You can work with me to create your year-end campaign. So if that is something that you need, check out my website. I would love to work with any and all of you to make sure you have a successful year-end campaign. And with that, we have gotten through everything, and I will hand it back to Candace.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This has been absolutely amazing. You made it through all this content and it has been unbelievable. I've gotten a lot of comments. So many people are even chatting in now just saying thank you and that was so fabulous. And so I saw a bunch of comments throughout asking if it's being recorded. Yes, I'm getting all of this together, the recording, the slides, and then we've been sharing a lot of links that will be included in tomorrow's email as well. So you're going to get all of this tomorrow. Don't worry too much. You haven't missed anything. Yeah, so without further ado, if you're interested in using CauseVox, CauseVox can help you raise more with less effort online this year end. You can build your year end campaign, make it all pretty and branded, and have a central place to drive all your donors. If you're interested in chatting about what this could look like for your organization, there is a free consultation with myself or another member of our team. That's the Calendly link. You can book us directly. Also, if you just want to get started, we have really flexible pricing. You can start off on our basic plan. It's completely free. Or you can always sign up for our 14-day trials. There's no credit card required for that. So if you want to poke around, see if it's a good fit for you, feel free to go to our pricing page and you can sign up from there. I also wanted to point you all towards a couple of resources as well. So we've talked a lot about creating that central hub, that page for your year-end fundraising. So whether that's on CauseVox or maybe you're just driving people through a landing page on your website or whatever you may be using, we'd be happy to review that. We're having we're calling it our donation or our year-end fundraising page throwdown, and our team is going to be reviewing your year-end fundraising campaign sites live, and we will be providing what we like, a little bit of what we don't like. We'll be kind, and some suggestions on how you can improve your page to drive more results for year end. So that webinar is going to be next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Sign up for that. And if you're interested in submitting your page, you can go ahead and send us an email at support@causevox.com or email me directly at candace@causevox.com to enter in your site for review. So putting those emails in here in case anyone wants to just shoot me over their link, and we'll add it to our webinar next week. Also had a few things released recently. We're doing a lot of resources for you. Today we just posted our customizable Giving Tuesday social media toolkit. It's a customizable, it's 18 customizable templates for you to use and brand if you're participating in Giving Tuesday. So basically gives you the tools to really easily create with Canva some nice quality images to share leading up to and on Giving Tuesday to drive more engagement. So feel free to check that out as well. So I know that was a lot. I'm also going to include that in the summary. And then, yeah, we'll leave. I know it's 3 o'clock, Kelly. If you're able to stay on for just another couple of minutes and tackle 1 to 2 questions, I would love if you could hang on with us. I see you're getting your headphones, so no worries. So yeah, I just posted the link to the Giving Tuesday toolkit in the chat, and then I'll also send that there. Okay, awesome. So I've been trying to keep up with the questions as they've come in. So I picked out a few that I wanted to get to. So
Awesome.
Kelly, Sarah asks, how would a membership-based organization handle pre-launch cultivation if the target audience has never given money yet? There's not much to thank them for other than signing up for a newsletter. So what would you recommend for someone who's kind of cultivating that new audience?
Sure. So one of the things I like to do, I mean, I assume if they are members of your organization, they have given you something to become members. Telling them what that money does. One membership-based organization that I work with, where they started with memberships and then wanted to pivot that to fundraising, was we sent an email basically like, memberships pay for these parts of our mission. What we need funding for additionally is these parts of our mission. That we found was a very effective way to message that, saying thank you for all you're doing here, but here is what we need donations for. Was a great way to make that distinction. And then the other thing that I do sometimes is, I don't know, this is a little passive aggressive. I don't know. I'm from the South, so we do passive aggressive in a very charming way. But what I sometimes will do is something like, thanks to our donors, blah, blah, blah happened this year. When I'm sending that to people who are not currently donors. Because it is a thank you, it's an impact report, but it's also kind of a little bit acknowledging that, maybe you're not one of those donors. So thanks to our donors, we did this and that and that. Your gift today could really make a difference. We hope you'll become a donor. That kind of thing can be, I've seen that work well for people, especially because depending on how you message your membership program, I think donors can get confused between, oh, but my membership is a donation. So what do you mean I haven't donated? So, I mean, look at your membership materials and see if that is implied at all. I know some organizations, membership-based organizations I've worked with, have not really realized how much they were messaging their membership program as you help our mission, you make our mission possible. And then when you say, yeah, you're a member, not a donor, they're like, what are you talking about? So there's some course correcting that has to happen sometimes if that's what your organization has done. But like I said, what I did with that organization when we kind of realized they've been messaging their membership program as supporting their organization and their members being confused that they weren't considered donors, was making that distinction of memberships pay for this, fundraising, donations pay for this, is a helpful thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I also saw another question come in actually about spam. We were talking about this actually before everyone came on. We're saying that we feel like more things are ending up in our spam folders. So Kelly, do you have any suggestions to stay out of the spam inbox when it comes to these email appeals?
Oh gosh. Yeah, Candace and I were just talking about this. It's like, I think Gmail changed their algorithms and lots of emails I want are going in my spam right now. And I'm a little perplexed about that. But I think one thing I've seen organizations do is in their welcome email for signing up is to mention, like, add us to your safe senders list and have links to support documents and like how to do that in Gmail, how to do that in Outlook, how to do that in, a few of the major email clients. That's something that you could include in your thank you emails, is just say, like, we've got a lot of important communications coming up, make sure we're not in your spam junk folder. One thing I've done with another organization is we looked at people who hadn't opened. We pulled a report from MailChimp and looked at people who hadn't opened, and we were actually shocked by some of like their major donors had not opened an email from them in months. And so we actually called those people to see, like, are we in your spam folder? Can you make sure we're not? And incorporating that into the thank you call campaign that we did. So those are kind of my best tips. The actual tech side is not my area of expertise, but that's some of the things that I've worked with nonprofits on.
Yeah, for sure. And then you can always try, if you think that you might be ending up in the spam folder, I know we like our pictures. It really does help drive more engagement, but maybe try a plain text email as well, where it's, basically looks like it's just an individual writing, there's not a lot of pictures in there, and that can help you stay out of the spam folder a little bit. We play around with that here at Cosvox. So try not to end up in your spam folder. So okay, cool. And then and sort of related question. Morgiana asks, any recommendations to connect with individuals who have recently connected through their free online arts program? So they just recently subscribed to receive updates. They don't want to turn their donors off with too much solicitation. And so that's where they are. Do you have any suggestions to keep people subscribed?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I like to say vary up your asks with thank yous and reports. That's critical. If everything you're sending is an ask, especially in the month of December, people are going to unsubscribe because they don't want that. But if you're varying that up with helpful content, with newsletters, with thank yous, that can be a really helpful way to make sure people don't, tune you out. Also, I like to say, I mean, cultivation is real. Once you identify people who could be donors, cultivating them is a really important step before you ask. I always, Candace has heard me say this before, but I consider solicitations like a marriage proposal, right? If you do it too soon, the person's gonna be real caught off guard and they're gonna say no. And then they might not want to talk to you anymore. So they're gonna turn tail and run. So maybe if it's people who have just like gotten turned on to your organization last month, maybe toning down the asks, taking them out of the majority of your asks and making sure they see the thank yous, but then, hitting them with just one or two asks. If it feels too soon to ask a donor, it probably is. I mean, most of us have good instincts on this. And so I don't want to say don't ask at all, but maybe tone down the asks, make us a different plan for those donors, and make sure they only see specific parts of your campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like that requires like a little bit of segmentation because you're still going to
Mhm.
want to do, if that older email list that's already a little bit more cultivated and prone, you're still going to want to do all of your regular
Right.
scheduled asks to them, but have like a separate email list with those newer contacts, and do some cultivation. I also think, maybe even throwing in a virtual event, nothing crazy, but having kind of a conversation sort of like this,
Mhm.
do like a ask me anything Zoom sort of webinar and get them engaged in some way. And so once you're engaging them, then they're a little bit more
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. And don't underestimate how engaging with your programs is cultivation too. If they've signed up for your free online programs and they are actually engaging with that and learning from that, that's your programs are cultivating them for you,
mhm.
to a certain degree.
Yeah, definitely. Um, awesome. And so let's see. Becky asked, what advice do you have for getting donors to involve their companies as corporate partners?
Ooh, yeah. That's one thing I like to do on mailed appeals and remittance envelopes is have a place where it explicitly asks, does your company match your gifts? And if so, how do we, who do we contact to make sure that happens? Because I think it's something that sometimes people just don't think about. Um, so that is something. It could also be on your online on your online fundraising hub, like your CauseVox site, having a place maybe in the sidebar that says, does your company sponsor organizations? Get them involved, more information here, and link it to a page on your website that has that information. A lot of what I do with that is more just making people aware of matching gifts programs or corporate partnerships that you offer. And then going from there. That is also something often I don't worry about it in the solicitation process, other than making sure if their employer matches their gift that we can get that match. But it's something that I will have people bring up on thank you calls to donors. So again, where thank you calls come in real handy is, I'm calling, I wanted to get to know you. What do you do? How did you find us? Oh, you work for Microsoft? Cool. How can we, do you know these people? How can you get us plugged in with your business? That kind of thing. That is 100% what thank you calls are all about, is finding out how the donor can get more engaged with you and help you as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge opportunity to even just leverage any other, like, not even donors, but board members and any other sort of existing connections as well with those who are a little bit closer to your organization, and seeing if they can get involved with maybe even running their own campaign for you. So we have a lot of customers that they literally just provide a campaign site, like a crowdfunding site to their partner, and then their partner just like runs with it to fundraise.
Yeah.
And it does work really well.
Yeah.
Or get them involved in peer-to-peer too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is the last question, just because I don't want to take too much more of your time, Kelly. An anonymous attendee asked, do you have any donor CRM recommendations?
Okay. It depends on your needs. Candace, you can talk to the back end of CauseVox, and there's some donor CRM content built into the back of that. I've had newer organizations just use that for a little bit. But for more, that's what they're intended for, is donor CRMs. My personal favorites are Bloomerang and Kindful. And so I really, really like both of those. They're great. If you're considering a new donor CRM, I would say set up a demo with both, because they both have different strengths and weaknesses that I couldn't tell you which is better for your organization unless I knew specifically what you're looking for. If you're a membership-based organization, my favorite CRM to use that does both memberships and donations is Neon One. I've worked with them with a number of organizations, and their people are really great, and they can handle, it's a very robust CRM. So it can do memberships, it can do donations, it can do event registration. It's really, really well built. And I see a question, what is a CRM? It's a customer relationship management tool. And so basically it's a donor database. That's what we call a donor database. But I think when we think database, we're thinking, an Excel sheet with names, but CRMs do a lot more. They can track your interactions with donors. They can auto send email, all of that kind of stuff. I see a question about Salesforce CRM. Salesforce is not my favorite for nonprofits. It's not built for nonprofits. And so you really have to jerry rig it to work for nonprofits. And I've seen organizations have really mixed results with Salesforce. I think it's because they offer it as a free tool. People are very intrigued by it. But I've seen organizations have to do a lot of work, and they probably sink enough staff time into setting it up that it's not worth it. But I mean, it's, again, I've seen people though that have a sales background that love the Salesforce CRM for donors. So it's all about what your organization needs. But if you want some recommendations, Bloomerang, Kindful, and Neon One are my favorites.
Yeah, I like all those as well. And so what's great too is that if you do your fundraising on CauseVox, you're actually able to automatically push donor data into all three of those, and Salesforce as well. So we offer integrations that make it really easy. So a donation comes in, that data goes automatically into Kindful or Bloomerang or any of those. So yeah, try and make it streamlined. We also, CauseVox does have a light CRM. It doesn't work for, it's a lightweight CRM. So it depends on the size of your organization and what your exact needs are. But if anyone's interested and want to book that consultation that I've pasted in the chat before, I can always go over that in our conversation as well to see if that could meet your needs. Yeah, so I think I know that there's questions that we haven't gotten to, and I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I would love to connect with all of you. So if you email us at support@causevox.com, I'd love to connect. And then I'll also be including that option to book that 30-minute consultation with Kelly as well in that follow-up email. So thank you all. There's so many of you that are still on with us, and I really appreciate you staying on and all your great questions and awesome engagement. And so I would love to connect further with anyone who is interested. And thank you so much, Kelly, for the amazing webinar.
Thank you, Candace. I always love working with you all. So
it's so good to have you. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Have a great rest of your day to
Bye.
you and everyone that's still attending.
Bye.
Take care.